Welcome everybody. It's episode 429 of the Severe MMA podcast. My name is Sean Sheehan, aka the Pod God, podcast Shawnee podcast, whatever you want to call me. Joined today by the Mises Caicedo of Irish MMA media, Graeme McDonald, as we talk about it was a full week in the world of mixed martial arts. We're going to start off with something a little bit different, and I'm going to throw it over to Graeme here in a second to take us away. But before we get into all of that, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to unleash that beast within you. And this summer, Manscaped is here to help you take your beach game to the next level with their Beard Hedger Pro Kit. They're going past waist deep in the grooming game and diving in headfirst to your facial hair fantasies. The Beard Hedger is a game changer, allowing you to shape your beard like a true beach babe. So this summer, let the beach balls bounce and turn heads all over the place. Visit manscaped.com and use the code SevereMMA for 20% off and free shipping. It's time to tame that mane. So say goodbye to your stubble and trouble with Manscaped's Beard Hedger Pro Kit. It starts with that Beard Hedger. It's a cordless rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths all in one guard, so no more fucking drawers full of shite, add-ons and messy stuff and all of that. It's waterproof, so you can use it in the shower or whatever. Titanium T-blade as well. It's tough on hair but smooth on your face, and it brings that one stroke satisfaction that we all are looking for. Doesn't end there though. It has dermatologically tested formulations as well to in that Pro Kit. The beard shampoo and conditioner, because your beard hair is a little bit different from your head hair. It's a bit more coarse and stuff like that, so it'll help that even better. Specifically designed to moisturize, reduce ingrown hairs, and replace natural oils to promote the beard health. Next on Manscaped's beard oil, which is after all of that, you put on the old beard oil there. It relieves dryness on the beard and the skin beneath as well, adding a little shimmer and a shine, and you cap it all off with the beard balm. A pomade that shapes, styles, moisturizes and tames for a sculpted look to attract any fellows or dames. The Pro Beard Kit also comes with 3 free gifts, which are a beard brush, a comb, and a scissors to help it all out at the very end. So for all of that, get 20% off and free shipping with the code SevereMMA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code SevereMMA. Manscaped Beard Hedger, one stroke, one guard, 20 lens. And while you're there as well, we're all here on the Severe MMA podcast about upkeeping yourself, and first impressions do matter. There's no two ways around that. Your face is the most likely first thing someone notices about you, and how your skin looks is going to determine good or bad the first impression. Myself and Graeme, we've decided it's time to put the best face forward and use Caldera Lab. It's clinically tested to reduce wrinkles, fine lines, and signs of aging. Caldera Lab is the leader in men's skincare and is here to save the day and your confidence. Use our code SevereMMA at calderalab.com and get 20% off their best products. As I said, the first impressions matter, but the first impressions of the Caldera Lab products are really good as well. They have the regimen, which is a twice-a-day formula to transform your skin, and it's super easy to do, and that's really the best part about it. Literally takes 30 seconds in the morning and at night. A little time for huge benefits. It's like brushing your teeth. You might know it after one day, but after a week, you'll absolutely know about it. And these products work in a similar sort of way. You use the clean slate to start your day. It's a face wash that leaves all skin types refreshed, and you use the base layer to moisturize and hydrate. It absorbs fast, so you won't have a big wet face. And in the good is your go-to at night. It's a face serum to round things out. Clinically proven multifunctional serum that helps your skin look tighter and smoother, as well as helps reduce the visibility of wrinkles and fine lines. If you want to take it a step further, the Icon then is an eye serum that helps you address the 3 most common signs of skin concern around the eye, which are fine lines, dark circles, and buffiness, which, if you're an MMA fan, you definitely need. Caldera Lab is made with top-tier ingredients and a legit showstopper that is good for you today and the long run. All it takes is 30 seconds in the morning and 30 seconds at night. Trust me, it's all about good skincare there, and I got mine kind of locked down now, Graeme, and it's I'm the better for it. So get 20% off if you want to do the same using the code SevereMMA at Manscaped.com. Sorry, Manscaped, they'll kill me. KillerLab.com. That's 20%. I feel like I was held at gunpoint there or something. Like, they're not going to kill me. That's 20% off at KillerLab.com by using the code SevereMMA. Jump into skin and first impression royalty with Caldera Lab. Right, Graeme, here we go. It's your time to shine here, because usually I come on and I hear Graeme and then I start talking about something for 10 minutes. But today, a little bit different. You've been doing a lot of research into this UFC and fighter, I suppose, court case. Tell us what's your first impressions. Not first impressions, because it's been going on for about 5 years, but after looking into it a good bit and talking to a few people and things, tell us everything we need to know about it, Graeme.
Yeah, I think the actual first thing was filed back in like 2013, and it's been dragging on for a long time, but I think it really got going about 5 or 6 years ago. And obviously Kung Lee and Nate Quarry are kind of the two people who've put themselves forward the most, but there's other fighters, other ex-fighters of the UFC listed, and there's also 1,215 fighters who fought between December 16th, 2010 and June 30th, 2017, who fought in UFC bouts that were promoted or that took place in the USA or were broadcast in the USA. So, that would qualify a lot of people who were active in the UFC between those years, including like the Irish kind of related names like Ashton Daly, Paul Redmond, Artem Lobov, Cathal Pendred, Charlie Ward, Neil Seary, Paddy Houlihan, Norman Park, Joseph Duffy, Gunnar Nelson, and I'm not sure, probably Conor McGregor as well, depending on if he has a different contract, but I don't know anything about that. But so the reading is, quote, who competed in one or more live professional UFC promoted bouts taking place or broadcast in the United States from December 16th, 2010 to June 30th, 2017. It says that if the lawsuit is successful, they're talking about between $800 million and $1.6 billion. And the US anti-law trusts permit private plaintiffs to recover 3 times the damages to prove they have, quote, suffered. Like this would mean the UFC would obviously have to pay 3 times any settlement that was ordered by the jury. So if the jury were to order $1 billion, it would become $3 billion. So that's a lot of dough. Obviously, this is a landmark decision during the week. This is the furthest it's gotten, and obviously anything like this has gotten, and obviously there's still a way to go or whatever. And the UFC or Zuffa, will have the ability to file an appeal in the next 30 days, I believe, which they will likely do. I'd say, more than likely anyway. But the judge and the court in the judgment that came out, like John Nash over Bloody Elbow has been covering this brilliantly. Follow him on Twitter at Hey Not in the Face, is it?
Hey Not
the Face. Sorry,
yeah.
John Nash. He's been covering this and he's put out a lot of stuff. So a lot of the stuff I'm quoting here is from him and from the court documents and things. So brilliant stuff by him. So this is a lot of money. This is a lot of money, but it's a lot of money that, I think anybody who's really kind of dialed into what's been going on, the practices, the UFC, the contracts, the kind of all the control is with the UFC, and everybody kind of knows that, and maybe we're used to it and desensitized to it. But really, if you think about it, it's not right. Like, it's the UFC is obviously the UFC brass have obviously made a lot of money and they put in a lot of hard work, but the court ruled that there was no like magical, new promoting strategy or new business strategy that led to this. It was basically just underpaying the fighters and taking out the competition. And there's quotations in there from, or there's text messages in there between like Dana White and Lorenzo in evidence about resigning Gilbert Melendez when Melendez's contract with Zuffa was ending, and he had an agreement with Bellator. So Zuffa exercised the right to match and re-sign Melendez. Fertitta texted Dana saying, "We got to keep these fucking guys oxygen until they tap out. We have sacrificed too much to let anybody get traction now." And at his deposition, Lorenzo Fertitta testified that the fuckers were Bellator, and while the oxygen referred to fighters like Gilbert Melendez and Eddie Alvarez. And then, that's pretty damning from a non-law person looking at that. To me, that seems pretty damning. There's another one where, Dana has kind of said a lot of things publicly that maybe other presidents or CEOs wouldn't have said. And maybe some of this stuff will come back to bite him now in this court case, because he admitted openly to counter-programming in May 2019 in an ESPN article. He said he'd, quote, thrown together the card in 5 weeks in an attempt to choke out a dangerous upstart promoter. I'm doing this, I quote, I'm doing this fight for one reason, to make Affliction spend money. If they're in business in January, I'll be horrified. And there's other stuff as well. There's Joe Silva talking to Dana White and Lorenzo in messages or in emails, I'm not sure which actually, said, quote, I have stolen the following fights out from underneath Strikeforce in the last couple of days. Joey Villasenor, Ricky Fukuda, Phil Baroni, Dennis Hallman. It's basically the judge and the court seem to side with the plaintiffs, with the ex-fighters bringing the suit, that the UFC had over a 90% share of the market and had done this through monopolistic means, and that had they have Joe Silva talking about lowballing Diaz on purpose, Nick Diaz on purpose, just because he could, and saying that if Nick Diaz had turned down the fights, he would have just. This was when he was renewing his contract. So he had one fight left in his contract. They wanted to give him 4 or 5 fights. They offered him like 18 and 18 for the first fight. If he wins, it goes up a little bit. It goes up a little bit again. And if he doesn't take the last fight on his contract that they offered, or he doesn't take this deal, the last fight on his contract, he'll be offered a really tough guy on a prelim, so he's kind of out of the spotlight. And like Joe Silva apparently has like openly admitted to all these practices in his testimony. So it seems pretty bad for the UFC or the Zuffa, and pretty good for Kung Lee and Nate Quarry and the 1,215 fighters, including all those Irish ones and a lot of UK ones that we've watched over the years, and that a lot of these fans who be listening to this podcast would have kind of, started watching MMA during their period. And the UFC made a lot of money, they sold for a lot of money, and these fighters are left kind of, for example, you might get 8 and 8. Like that was still going at the time during these years. You might get $8,000 to show. If you don't win, you're just leaving with $8,000. You can't even pay for a camp. You can't even pay your coach. You can't pay for anything with that. You can't live off that. And then if you don't take a fight the UFC you don't want, they just make it more difficult for you, or just wait and make you wait. There's also about, just basically Dana White kind of has, as I said earlier, has made a lot of public statements that maybe, haven't been listed in this court judgment, but will come back to haunt him if they do go to trial. The judge just basically took the side of all the experts from the ex-fighter side. I'm no legal expert, from reading the 80-page document. If anything I'm saying here is wrong and anybody knows is a legal expert, feel free to email the podcast and let me know. But from what I could see and the court seemed to agree with all of the fighters' arguments and their experts, and disagree with everything Zuffa put forward, except for the identity class, which was
what does that mean?
That's like if they were on video games or merchandise or things like that, if their image was used, they're not entitled to be in this lawsuit. But
so it's a class action. It's like all of them together. It's a class
action. Yeah. So you're automatically in if you're one of these fighters, and the only way to get out is to opt out. Which why would you? You should have this money coming. These fighters should at least have a decent house and be settled after the shows they were involved in. People like Neil Seary, Carl Pendred, all of these guys, they were in these big shows, and the UFC built an empire off their back. I know they'd already been building that empire, but these were key years, these 2010 to 2017, and the explosion of MMA or explosion of the UFC. So, these fighters should be compensated. And I think anybody kind of saying otherwise, I think hasn't really looked into it, or hasn't really thought about it, or just doesn't give a shit about the fighters.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that, and I don't think there ever was from the start. What I think the biggest doubt about, for me, as someone who's very much been on the outside of paying attention to this for a long time, just because it's gone on for a long time, is that I think the fact it went on for such a long time, everyone was like, me anyway, I was like, well, the UFC are just pushing this and pushing this and pushing this down the road and down the road and down the road to basically do what they said they were doing with Bellator and Strikeforce. It's just like, take enough of like the heart out of the opposition and take enough of the money out of their pockets that they just can't go on anymore. And that's what all these massive companies always do, but that's what it seems like it was. Now, what's the difference here, I think, and just from my own point of view, and I suppose a lot of people are probably in my same point of view, because like everything you said there, I read that like 3 years ago, you know, basically, and I'm like, well, what's the difference now? Well, I think the difference now is the judge has made the decision to push it forward so that, and as you said, Graeme, unless there is an appeal within the next, 30 days, 90 days, it'll go forward to court, and then there'll be different things decided and all. So
but even if there is an appeal, from what I read, the judge seems to be pretty strong, you know, and if another appeals judge is a different judge looking at the ruling, you know, it's a pretty strong ruling from what I can see.
Yeah, it's just taken them so long to actually make this ruling. Like, I always felt at the very start of when it came out, like when you read what you just read there, Graeme, when you say what you just said there, it just feels like such a no-brainer. Like, and you look at the numbers, and they're out there as well with John Nash. I think, what is it, 20% or something like that? It's like of the profits are going to the fighters. Now, don't quote me exactly on those, but you, as I said again, go over to Bloody Elbow and see John Nash's work on that. Well, like whatever the number is, it's like a way lower than other normal sports, and that's one part of it, right? But then the monopolistic part, just to explain that maybe a little bit as well, because I'll put my economics degree to use for one part. You don't need to be a monopoly to show monopolistic endeavors, I suppose, for if you would excuse the pun, because like people are probably thinking, how can they be a monopoly? PFL exists, Bellator exists, Cage Warriors exist. That's not necessarily, like, they're not a monopoly, right? But they show monopolistic tendencies. Like, they have what they would say anyways, all the best fighters in the world. They have, what was it, Graeme, 90% of the market share or something like that. It's absolutely massive, you know. It's like the NFL, you know. I'm sure there's other lads out there playing a game of football and stuff, but they're not the NFL, you know. So this was always one that I always thought...
It's probably even bigger than the NFL, because college football is actually, I believe, really popular in America. Yeah.
I always thought this had... I always thought this was a no-brainer, right? That the fighters are in the right, and I always thought it was never going to go anywhere, right? So hopefully this is actually changing that, and hopefully this actually does mean that it will go somewhere, and it will turn into a massive thing, and that it will turn into something that the fighters all make money out of, because that'd be absolutely fantastic. I saw John Nash put up a tweet about, like, there's two parts to this as well. What has happened in the past, and they have to pay money for that, which we don't know how much it'll be, hundreds of millions or whatever it might be. But then if they might have to change practices in the future where they would have to pay the percentage going forward, which would be a massive thing for them as well. So I look,
and this also could be a precursor for something like the Muhammad Ali Act equivalent in MMA. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Seems to me inevitable in time as well. Very interesting.
Like I don't know about the Muhammad Ali Act so much. I think what we have now, right? And I think this suit makes a lot of sense. And I think if the UFC or Zufar or whatever it's called, Nuco now, or have to pay all this money, I think that's a really good thing, right? And I actually don't think it'll affect the sport much, to be honest. But I think if the Ali Act came in, I think it would. I think that's a big difference, and it makes it more like boxing. And people probably say, oh, well, Shawnee, we should be making it more like boxing. Look what the main event fighters are getting paid there and everything. Yeah, but I don't know. Look what the lower down fighters are getting paid in boxing. It's going to completely change how, like, MMA promotions are run. I don't know. Am I fully behind the Ali Act? I didn't, maybe, and like, if it is the Ali Act, right, in MMA, and I saw people, Randy Couture and others talk about this before. It's not going to be the Ali Act. It's going to be something different. It's going to be, you know, whatever it's called.
Kind of equivalent, but yeah.
And hopefully that's better, and hopefully we see something about that. And that's going to be way down the line, I would say. But hopefully when we do see something about that, it makes more sense than, say, the Ali Act would for MMA. But yeah, I think, like, to be fair, I'm still relatively skeptical about whether this is a massive thing or not. my first thoughts in it are that how are the UFC going to delay this again? You know, are they going to appeal? And then how long is that appeal going to take? And could that be another 2 years before the appeal is either granted or thrown out? And let's say it is granted, then they go to wherever they go next. Let's say they go to court, and that's going to take however long. And then there's going to be an appeal of that, and that's going to be another, like, it could be another 4, 5, 6 years by the time this is all said and done. Like, you know, and that's just pure conjecture from me based on what's already happened. So hopefully this is a huge week for it, Graeme, but I'm still skeptical. What you, as someone who, like me, is a bit of a skeptic, what do you think? Do you think this will change it, and do you think it'll get done quickly, or do you think it's going to take ages?
Well, like, I think the UFC, the Zuffa will, whatever, the Zuffa lawyers will try and drag this out as long as they can, you know, stall it. But I think this is a pretty, like, landmark, historic ruling that's already happened. You know, the UFC lawyers would really have to pull something out of the hat, because I think the court pretty much dismissed all of their kind of counterclaims to the plaintiffs, the ex-fighters' claims. He just kind of rubbished them. So that's they're going to have to change strategy quickly for this appeal. You know, it could be a couple more years if the appeal goes through, but they still have to get an appeal granted, and you know, they'll have to. A lot of it will come down to the judge, which judge is appointed in I think it's called the 9th District. To
where is that?
Overview. I'm not sure.
That'll make a big difference as well. If it's in Vegas or somewhere, that could make a big difference.
This ruling from this judge was in Nevada, so you know, it's already looking really bad for the UFC, you know. Well,
yeah, but like the UFC have a lot of pull in Nevada.
They haven't made it go away yet, you know. That it's been going on for a long time, and a big battle was just won by the ex-fighters. So it's I think it's very promising.
Yeah, I hope I'm not seeing like I'm negative on this or anything. I'm just skeptical as well. I'm 100% behind it.
Yeah, well, up until this ruling, I just assumed that this thing would just go away, and we just wouldn't. It would just be like a kind of rinky-dink operation, and it wouldn't be, you know, it wouldn't be the UFC lawyers or the Zuffa lawyers would just be so much more powerful. But by the looks of things and what I'm hearing, there's a great confidence from the ex-fighter side that they're in a really, really good position here.
One thing as well, and I don't know, just to throw this out there, right? So this has been going on for how long, Graeme? 5, 6 years, a long time anyway. There must be someone else involved in this rather than just the ex-fighters, like, because there's no way the amount of money involved, you know, to keep this going would be just pay, like Kung Lee and John Fitch or whoever else is in it, would be absolutely broke if they weren't. So there must be something behind this. Look, I'm sure all of that will come out. Maybe people already know about that or whatever, but maybe that's a good sign. Like, the fact that they have been able to stay in it for this long means that, like, well, somebody smarter than us obviously probably knows something. Like, if this was...
Yeah, you know, if the lawyers involved have waited it out for this long, a couple more years of waiting it out, it's probably, you know, penciled in as a likelihood anyway.
Yeah, it's all very interesting, and I think it's after getting a lot more interesting there because... you know, Zuffa
could come and try to settle this. You know, they could try and settle this instead of appealing if they don't feel they have grounds to successfully appeal.
Like, if Zuffa feel like Nevada is not with them, right? And they feel they might lose it, like they will almost definitely settle, I would say, and they'll probably attempt to settle in a way that they pay money but don't have to change anything. If you get me,
yeah. Like, well, if they go to a jury and the jury award $1 billion, for example, which is in the low range of the estimate, that would be $3 billion. Like, that'd be trebled. That is a lot of money.
I wonder why that is. It's just a rule, is it?
It says U.S. antitrust laws permit private plaintiffs to recover 3 times the damages to prove that they have, quote, suffered.
That's mad. That is, and like, all these fighters deserve it. There's no doubt about it. Like, there's no doubt about that at all. And I always find it.
And sorry, the court also compared it to boxing a lot as well, which I don't think is good for the Zuffa side either.
No, that definitely isn't. Like, it's a very odd situation because I think Dana White said it the other day, there's 650 people under contract with the UFC at the moment as fighters, but it wasn't always that. Maybe sometimes people forget, and you know, they'd be thinking, okay, I'll compare it to, you know, Liverpool or Man United or whatever. And look, it's easy for Man United or Liverpool to pay someone, 200 grand a week because they've only 29 players or 30 players or whatever like that. Well, the UFC has 650 people. It was, first of all, it wasn't always like that. Second of all, they're not getting paid every week. They only compete once, twice, or 3 times a year at most. So, like, these are things, if you add it all together and all, and as they have, it's the percentage is the thing to look at and all, and there's no doubt about it that down through the years the fighters have absolutely been screwed with the percentage of the money that they've gotten, and hopefully this is the change, and hopefully all the people you named there, plus all the fighters down through the years, the Spencer Fishers and the your Joe Lozans and your whoever else, all get paid and all get what they should have been. Even if it's like a fighter who had one fight and they end up getting fucking 500 quid or something like that, it's better in their pockets than the fucking UFC's pockets, who've been Dana White fucking giving the Nelk boys 10 grand to do a fucking a round of fucking blackjack or something. Like, fuck off with that shit.
Yeah, I believe it's going to be kind of like, if you were in the main event, you obviously your share for that would be slightly more than somebody who never or only fought on the prelims and things like that. Or if you were a ranked guy, maybe you'll get more than if you weren't a ranked guy. And
yeah,
like
I was reading a bit of that. It made a lot of sense, because they're not going like, oh, everyone should be paid the same as Conor McGregor or anything.
Yeah,
like that.
If you had one fight and came in on the first fight of the night on like UFC on Fuel TV or something back then, you're not going to get as much as, a guy who's main evented, been sold as the main event and been advertised as the main event and, brought in a lot more eyeballs and ticket sales and stuff like that. Yeah,
makes complete sense. I suppose we'll watch this space, I suppose, as they say, and see where things go. But I think it's very interesting, and we will see where all of this moves and where all of this shakes over the next one.
I don't know why fighters haven't really spoken out about their people. I think the fighters are they don't want to say how much they earned for a fight, so they don't want to release that information. But that's the kind of information that people don't know and people want to know. And if they did know, maybe they would be more supportive of this kind of thing. I think a lot of fans assume that these fighters are like maybe not super wealthy like an NFL or an NBA or a boxer that's been a known quantity on television and things like that. But at least they're comfortable, But a lot of these guys, most of these guys are broke as shit, to be honest. So yeah, I think fighters kind of being very honest about their treatment and about their pay and about why they didn't fight a certain guy or how they ended up fighting another guy. Maybe Joe Silva had kind of used some of the tactics that he admitted to in the evidence that the court in the court findings. So yeah, maybe the silence has kept the UFC kind of protected from this kind of thing, this kind of public lawsuit and successful kind of rulings because of this silence. So maybe it's time for fighters to start talking.
Indeed. You can ex-fighters, I think especially, it'd be very tough now for, I mentioned Joe Lozan or someone like that, but maybe not even necessarily him. It's tough for the younger fighters to speak out about anything like this because they don't want their opportunity to go either. I don't think you can blame them for that. But then, the problem with it then is when someone say Kung Lee talks, or let's say any of the ex-Irish fighters, or name retired fighter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. People are probably saying, why didn't you say it at the time? You're just another disgruntled ex-fighter, and all of this. But, you don't see disgruntled ex-fucking Liverpool players or Man United players. That's just not a thing. They're disgruntled because they should be disgruntled because they didn't get paid fucking enough, and that they were used, abused, and fucking thrown out, to the profit of Dana White and the other people involved in Zuffa. It's and we talk about this all the time. Every time myself and Harry do a speaker's corner, it always comes down to fighter pay, and we almost have to leave it to the side to have a discussion about MMA because it impacts absolutely everything. If you think about MMA, the I suppose the disjointed nature of MMA, it's all down to fighter pay. It really is all down to it. It's very tough as well, even when you get to the UFC for your first good amount of fights, to actually change much to become a more professional fighter, because the amount of tax you're paying on the money you get is not going to leave you with much. So you like, let's say, look, Caelan Ockin or Reece McKee, let's say they wanted to go to America, right? If they get 3 fights into the UFC, what's that? Like, they start off at fucking 12-12 or whatever it be. Let's say it's 16-16 by the end of it. That's still not that much money. Like.
What happens if you go over to America to train, do your camp over there, and then 3 weeks out you get injured, or your opponent gets injured and they don't find a replacement, and then you don't get paid at all?
You're fucked.
Like that's not right. Like, you know what I mean?
No. It's really not, and all these things add up, and like every fighter probably has a story like that. Like, even if you're sitting at home and, you know, above in Belfast or over in Liverpool or wherever it might be, and you're signed up for a fight and you get injured, like, you see so many people. Actually was talking to a manager of a fighter there last night, and they were like, don't be too hard on my guy. After losing this last weekend, he came in, I think he did like a torn labrum and on. He's like, he had to fight, he needed the money.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you are injured, you can't afford to pull out, because you put in all this money, you've put in all this effort, and you don't know when you're going to get to fight again, because you basically have no control. They just kind of move you around like pawns, and you got to kind of obey, or you're going to make them mad. And that, you know, people like Irish guys like, you know, Neil Seary working in a warehouse. Like, we made that UFC Dublin preparation video when he's about to fight in a huge show, and he's working in a warehouse. You know, you can go back and watch that video, and Neil Seary prepares for Phil Harris at UFC Dublin. That shouldn't be. Like, you know, people, UFC champions driving as Uber drivers a couple of years ago and things like that while fighting in the UFC. Like, this just is, something's wrong here. Like, and if people don't think something's wrong, then I think something might be wrong with them.
Yeah, and like,
you know, if Dana was on the other side of this, and boxing promoters or another promotion were doing this, he wouldn't shut up. He'd be talking about these scumbags. You know, he would. Like, you know, Dana's able to win people over. He's able to, you know, make deals. He's able to build a promote. He's done a great job. He's a huge figure in the history of MMA, but like, anybody who's trying to claim that Dana White wouldn't be arguing that this is a disgrace, what has happened to these guys, if he was on the other side of it, or if it was a rival promotion or a rival sport, you know he would.
100%. And I think the thing is, like, don't get it twisted. Like, you're not saying every fighter in the UFC should be on this massive money or anything like that, but at least give them a guarantee. At least give fighters who have been there for, like, let's say more than 5 or 10 fights or whatever it might be, let's give them something a little bit additional. Let's give them an actual contract. Let's make them actual employees, so they maybe have healthcare. They have something long term. Like, what about if the fighter's more than 20 fights? Something. Let's give them a pension plan or something like that, so they can actually retire. Like, all of these.
You have these like these guys who are like, you know, main event and cards, and, you know, well-known guys for a lot of years that are still fighting now and things like that. And even those guys now are like begging for 50 grand bonus, a 60 grand bonus. Yeah. Like, what does that say? Like, you know, what does that tell you?
100%.
You see, like LeBron James, or even like, you know, some random like player for any American sports or soccer team ever ever be kind of begging on the pitch for like a 50 grand bonus or things like that. That's how tight the guy is. Here's
the thing, right? I was watching there's a new Newcastle United documentary came out on the streaming services. I was watching it with the missus yesterday, and they made this thing about Sean Longstaff, right, who was there before the Saudis took over and all that, right? So, and she goes to me, how much do you think he's on a week? And I didn't know the answer. I haven't even looked up the answer. But what did you think, Graeme? What would you think Sean Longstaff would be on
before the Saudis came along?
Yeah, but like, I don't think he got a new contract. But even then, okay. Like, you know, remember Man United were trying to buy him and stuff like that. And
I'd say 20 grand a week.
Yeah, maybe. I would say maybe possibly even a little bit more. Right, like, and imagine that, right? There's this middle of the road Premier League player who, like, at one stage, like, I think he might have got a better contract around him. So I think he could be on even 50 grand a week. Like, let's say something around that, right? Imagine they're on that amount of money. And, like, some really, really good UFC fighters or MMA fighters, whatever you want to call them, are not nearly on that for one fight. I just looked
it up. It says Sean Longstaff signed a 3-year, £7.8 million contract with Newcastle FC, including an annual average salary of £2.6 million.
Right, so get your calculator out. What's 2.6 million divided by 52 there? But anyway, it's what is that? I don't know. That's
2.6 million. Hold on, I'll do it now while you talk.
Go on. And the point of this is, right, it's like, why can't fighters be looked after longer term. And I'll say it again, Graeme, like, okay, if a fighter comes in and they lose 3 fights or whatever and they're gone, no problem. Like, I'm not saying you have to put every bit of money, you have to look after someone for the rest of their life because they fought for you for a wet weekend. I'm not saying that at all, right? But what I would say for that, give them a minimum. Like, give them a minimum of 2 fights or give them a minimum of 4 fights. So no matter what they do, they know they're going to have 40 grand or 46 grand, or even if they lose all those 4 fights.
Well, Sean Longstaff actually looked up 50 grand.
That was a good guess by me. I got it right. Yeah. And like, why can that happen and it can't happen in MMA is a question I would throw
with the prospect of that being a lot more if you make yourself an important player for 100%.
The team. And like, even like in MMA, right? Even if you do make yourself the best fighter in the world or anything like that, high likelihood is, right, you're not going to get John Jones money, you're not going to get Conor McGregor money. The high likelihood is you get something where you're on like 500 grand for a championship fight, right? That is best case scenario for you. Like, best case scenario for you is you get 500 grand and maybe you do it twice, maybe you do it 3 times. But like, is that enough for, and if you get 2 million in your career for a fighter who has put in years and years and years and parts of themselves and their body and their brain,
and somebody
is that
who
enough?
Would be also, a household name. A lot of these guys would be well known, and maybe not a household name, but in sports fans, even people who aren't MMA fans would know a lot of these guys' names and will be shocked to see their earnings throughout their UFC career.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see it with people who see the pay packets and get shocked by it. I always saw as well, like with the wrestling. Do you know the wrestlers like have to? So if you're a wrestler, the WWE. So if you're wrestling in New York tonight and you have another show in fucking LA tomorrow, you have to organize your own travel and pay for your own travel and everything like that. And I saw someone being asked about that at one time, and they were like completely. I think it was Bailey, the wrestler, like completely shocked that was happening. And like, it's not necessarily the same in terms of travel for the UFC, but in terms of people being shocked at how they're treated and how they're paid, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, we'll move on. That was an interesting discussion, Graeme. It's good. I think we need to have more discussions like that because it's very, very important. And Harry will probably be giving out now. We stole our speaker's corner there. But anyway, we do it. Let's talk about James Gallagher. I think he was probably maybe the biggest star this weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. He came back. Do you think he won, Graeme? What did you think? What do you think of the decision on this one?
Yeah, Jesus, I don't know. That's it's just a hard one to know. Like, I think it all came down to the second round where, James was on top but didn't really throw much, and his opponent was on bottom but was throwing kind of rabbit punches. Nothing really dangerous, but nothing that impactful, but a lot more than James threw. Like, if James had he did a couple of times land, like, obviously the force and the ability to land is better from the top, but if he had had a couple of more flurries or a couple of more big shots, then it would have been, that was definitely his round. But the way it went, I think I was expecting it to be like, I was expecting it to be at least a split decision, if not against James. To be honest, I thought that round he probably lost on the new rules, and if maybe you could go back and there was one big shot from James that was missed or something, that would probably be enough. But from the first watch, I think that second round, I think he probably lost it and lost the fight due to that. Yeah,
it's an interesting one because it's funny. Only a few weeks ago, we spoke about gravity, and Big John mentioned it on the commentary, like, which should make me look like an absolute genius. I was there first, but it's a thing that kind of came over from the old criteria. Like, shots from the top are going to score higher than shots from the bottom if they're of a similar shot, right? So if someone absolutely bangs you with an elbow from the bottom and cuts you open, now that's different. But if there's like a one punch and an equivalent punch from the bottom, the one from the top is going to, logically score more. And I think that's what got James over the line in the second round. But I agree, like, if James had done in the second round what he did in the first round, I don't think there'd be any question about it because he landed some really good ground and pound and some good stuff from him there. But with that said as well, I thought it was very close. Like, Gonzalez didn't really do anything massive from the bottom in the second round. Like, I probably would have scored it for Gonzalez 29-28 as well, but really, I sent it to a judge, and I was like, here, don't look at the results of this, score me that. And they scored it 29-28 Gonzalez. So I'm like, well, okay. And it's an interesting one as well, because I put it in the group. I was like, right, there's American judges here. The Top Control is going to win this, and it did. In the end, I feel like if this was in Cage Warriors or this was in the UK or somewhere with the UK judges, it might be a little bit different. But with that said, look, this definitely wasn't a robbery or a bad decision or anything like that. You know, it was a hotly, closely contested second round where really a lot didn't happen. Now, if people didn't see the fight, the first round, well, the first thing that happened was James came out and got rocked with a big shot immediately, but did so well to clinch up, take him down, and get that round back. And I was skeptical, like midway through. I was like, oh God, it's going to take an awful lot here. But James upped the pace and landed a load of big ground and pound. It was very, very good stuff from James. Like, this is a great round to show you how you can win a round with Top Control. It was absolutely brilliant. Landed a lot of shots there. In the second round, again, James got the takedown. Had over 4 minutes of Top Control, I believe, but didn't really land much. Gonzalez landed a bit from the bottom, as I said, very, very close. Not one of those rounds you complain about or anything like that. And then in the third round, James got the takedown early again after a bit of a back and forth in the feed, which Gonzalez was probably ahead with, but James did get the takedown, secured it, didn't really do much of it, and then Gonzalez swept him midway through it and landed a good bit of ground and pound. Wasn't close to a 10-8 or anything like that, but look, James definitely won the first, Gonzalez definitely won the third, and they all came down to that second round. Overall for James, it's absolutely great to see him back in there. You know, a couple of years out, he kept talking about, you know, his life. If people knew what was going on in the background, they'd think a lot differently of him. And, you know, you can take from that now from what you will, but it's definitely been a really tough time for James. If you just look at it even from the MMA side of it, he left Ireland to go and pursue a new gym with James Krause, and then James Krause goes up in smoke, and he's like, what do? He was back in Ireland for a while, and then he went back to America, and like, where's he training then? And he goes to Thailand. It's like, Jesus Christ, like that cannot be good for someone to come in.
Yeah, you could see it. You could see it in his performance that he wasn't sharp. He wasn't, like, he didn't look like he was an active fighter. Like when he didn't look the same as when he was active. And, you know, he straight away, he said that himself, like he was like basically saying like shy performance, all this stuff. But, you know, you get the win, you get the kind of rust off, you know, maybe some people dispute it, some people whatever say you lost or whatever, it doesn't really matter, it goes on the record. You move on, and, you know, you can kind of put the couple of years to kind of draw a line under that and say, okay, I'm on a winning streak again here, and I'm kind of rebuilding. I'm starting again, and as he would say, the Jimmy show is back.
100%. I think they should turn him around. It's 7 weeks, I think, or 6 weeks now till this Ireland card. I think he's been out for long enough. He's been preparing for long enough. It's time to turn things around now and get James another fight. Kai Kamaka was supposed to fight. There must be,
like, I actually don't know what the reason is, but there must be a reason why James Gallagher hasn't fought in Ireland. Yeah. In Ireland, he's been kind of moved away. What's going on there?
Bellator?
Is it just Bellator going to Bellator?
I'd say so, yeah. It's just Bellator, like, you know. That's just the way they operate. They're just, you know, you never know. You just never know with Bellator. Like, you never know what you're going to get from them. And I think that's exactly it here with this one. But like, and like I'm saying this as well. Like, I don't think that they will turn him around. Like, and he is called for it. I know. So Kai Kamaka called for it as well on Twitter, and Leandro Higo called for it as well. Like, I still think it's probably not going to happen. There's plenty of room for James on that card as well. It's not exactly like it's an absolute blowaway of a card or anything. Like, there's a fight, who is it? Mads Burnell against Daniel Weichel, which is a good fight, right? But that's on the main card. Let's move that to the prelims, and let's put James versus Kai Kamaka on the main card. Boom. It's way better of a card in. You like, that should be, I think that should be a no-brainer. But anyway, I suppose that's looking forward. But looking back, look, Jim, as he said, winners win. He went in there and he got the win, and that's all that matters. There was parts of it, look, he looked rusty, but I thought his wrestling looked very good. His wrestling is always good. He always obviously looked good in the ground, and if he can do what he did in that first round in terms of the ground and pound, added to his unbelievable jiu-jitsu game. Like Gonzalez, I think, is a jiu-jitsu, is it a brown belt or a black belt with under Matt Serra, so he's going to be very good and hard to submit. So the ground and pound is something that if James can add it to his game, it's a big part of it. The striking, look, obviously he got caught early, and that's going to make you a little bit, to think about it twice maybe when you're striking again. We didn't see too much striking from James. You know what I liked here about him? He looked, and this is a weird thing to say, even though he got cracked at the very start, but from then on, he looked a bit defensively better, and he looked like he was taking his time. There was one part as well where he kind of jumped into range and went immediately for a takedown. I was like, okay, that's fucking smart. You're putting yourself into a position where you're not actually going to hit.
Kiefer, I think, in his corner had say, like, you're either all the way in grappling or you're on the outside, and the second, like, Kiefer started shouting at James, basically, did that, and that's a good sign that you can kind of listen to your team. Some guys, their team will be shouting over and over and over and over again, and they won't do it. So I think, like, that's a good sign that he's dialed into what his team is telling him.
Yeah, 100%. And it's onwards and upwards now for James. Hopefully he can stay fit. The 145 thing will hopefully help him stay fit as well. I'm always a little bit skeptical when the guys, they don't seem that big. They go back up in weight, or like James, or go up in weight. We'll see how that works out. He was bigger than Gonzalez, so it didn't really play much into this one, but we'll see how it works out for him, and hopefully he gets turned around here pretty quickly. Elsewhere on this Bellator card, I suppose we might as well go through this. Alfie Davis got a good win. Leandro Higo, as I mentioned earlier on, beating Nikita Mikhailov. Vladimir Tokov got a unanimous decision win, as did Barzola against Jalen Bates. Justine Kish beat Askarova, who's a good prospect coming through there. And Sydney Outlaw out-wrestled Islam Mamedov. I think a lot of people were shocked by that. There was a few, maybe, a lot of actually underdogs on this who got wins. Aaron Jeffrey beat Dalton Rasta as well and took away his undefeated record. Moldavsky beat Steve Mowry, who kind of shat the bed in that one. It wasn't a great performance from Mowry at all. And then in the main event, Logan Storley, I suppose, kind of did what Logan Storley does and beat Brennan Ward. I don't know if you saw this, Graeme. I think this was another bit of an early stoppage. Wasn't too bad, but there was one in the UFC as well. We'll get to it, but this seems to be a new thing now, where we've a lot of like lads just like not getting the opportunity. This one wasn't too bad now. I won't give out too much about this one, but yeah, I don't know. Especially you're in the main event, you're a big fight. This could be a number one contender bout for Brendan Ward, I'm not giving.
I don't know if it's just me, but it seems like it's like contagious between judges. If like they start happening like little kind of groups or something. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it definitely does seem a bit like that. All right. Let's move on and talk about the UFC, Graeme. Not really much to talk about here. I didn't stand out to you. It feel like I was watching this, right, and I missed the first few prelims. I saw Anthony Joshua's boxing. I switched over to that. Switch back, watch all the main cards, and I'm like, did I really see anything that mattered that much? And not to be negative about it or anything, because like we're 48 minutes into the podcast before we even talk about this, but yeah, it was all right. There was a couple of good fights. There was a lot of good finishes, but like at the end of the day, just another random run-of-the-mill UFC card that they showed us. Any thoughts on it, Graeme?
Yeah, I think it's a lack of jeopardy. I think we're like broken records on some of these cards, but there's just not that much jeopardy. It doesn't really matter who wins or loses in terms of shaking up the divisions and things like that. Obviously, it matters for the fighters getting their win bonus and all that. And the Cub Swanson fight is probably the main talking point, the decision. For me, I thought Cub lost the second round, which would have lost him the fight. Maybe that late kind of flurry at the very end of the round, which was decent, but for me didn't do enough to overturn what I was already thinking. So maybe that's what swung it. So yeah, it was a close round. It wasn't a robbery or anything like that. But yeah, you got to feel for these guys. Like even Cub Swanson was clapping for Dawada. Is that Dawadu? Is that his name?
Dawadu, yeah.
Dawadu.
What about the third round? What did you think of the third round?
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think what happened in the third round.
The third round was the one that was like relatively even on the feet, and then Cub got a takedown with like 45 seconds to go, maybe a little bit long. No, a little bit longer than that. And he landed a bit of ground and pound, not too much. I can't remember any big strikes against Swanson, so probably, getting on top and landing the odd shot and it being pretty much even on the like nothing really standing out on the feet before that, it's probably enough to win it. But I think there's more of an argument against Swanson on that round than for Swanson on the second round, to be honest. Honestly, this was the type of fight that do you know what I'm just glad? I'm just glad that a couple of the judges gave the first round to Cub Swanson, because I definitely think he won the first round. That's the strongest I feel about this, right? And Ron McCarthy and Jacob Montalvo didn't give it to him. Sal D'Amato didn't have great respect for Sal, but it was a close round. But it was one of those rounds, right, where there was a lot of maybe control against the cage and everything like that. But Cub was hitting him with body shot after body shot. Like, Cub was landing the most impactful shots without a shadow of a doubt. And he fought like a very judging, smart type of fight here early. I thought, and actually throughout the whole fight, like, I really thought Cub came to compete, and he looked more powerful than he'd ever looked before as well. His body shape was a little bit different. I really thought that helped him here. Like, here's how I thought of it. I thought Cub won the first round, and I thought it was like, I wouldn't say it was a very close round. There's no doubt about it, very close. But I just think Cub landed the bigger shots. I think it's hard to argue. I
think I'd have to go back and watch that first round, because them body shots didn't even register as anything big for me.
I think they should, though. Like, compared to what Dawoodu landed. Like, what was Dawoodu landing? Like,
they weren't. You see vicious body shots, and you see kind of body shots up against the cage just for kind of not be doing anything.
We're not talking about a fight that had big vicious shots, especially not the first round. Like, those shots are more impactful to me than like most other shots that happened in it. But even if you leave that aside, he was landing some good shots too. He's landing some nice hooks and some nice like right hands down through the middle and things. Like, Dawoodu landed some nice stuff as well. But
I think he landed the harder stuff on the first round.
So. I thought it was. I thought it was definitely.
I'll go back and look at those body shots, but yeah, I don't know.
And it's not all the body shots I'm putting it down to as well, but I just think they should be scored. Like, I think they were. I
wasn't watching it with a judging eye. I wasn't like completely dialed in watching it like that, but I kind of had siphoned that off as you kind of just like move on to the next round and kind of have that in your score, and I didn't really think it was maybe I need to go back and watch that round.
The way Cub was fighting in the first 2 minutes had me dialed in. I was like, okay, hold on, this is a fight that they're talking about in the commentary, and we know the way Cub has fought down through the years, that this is going to be a fight that people, because Cub is kind of known. I remember even I was actually on a podcast with him years ago. I think it was MMA Tap Out Radio maybe, or something like that, or MMA Sentinel with Crooklyn back in the day. And he said himself, I remember on that, like, it was like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, he's like, I don't hit really hard. And I never really thought about it before that, but then I feel like that has kind of become a thing. But he was hitting, I really thought he was hitting hard last night, to be honest. Now, having said that, right, that's the first round. The second round, I think most people would agree he lost. Like, Sal D'Amato didn't agree with that as well. And that's the one round I would say, that doesn't look great. But anyway, 2 of the 3 judges gave him that, and then the third, all 3 judges gave it to him. I had it 1-1 going into the third, as you can probably guess. The third was so close. Like, I thought Cub was just behind when he got the takedown. I'm thinking, like, okay, Cub land 10 shots here, and you've won the round and you've won the fight. Pretty. You make it easy for the.
Or land one good shot and secure the round, and leave no doubt.
I don't think he landed a couple, right? And maybe that was enough. At the end of it, I was like, I really don't know who won this. Like, and people calling robbery, like, this is as far from a robbery as you could fucking find. It was. Is there a?
Well, I think when the reaction of Cub Swanson is like, the kind of like defeated loser clapping as the scores are being read and looking in shock, adds to the kind of what's
that got to do with it? We just watched the fight for 15 minutes.
But that's people's reaction I'm talking about on like social media and things.
Yeah, but people are fucking idiots. Like, what did you say to me there the other day? Like, 40% of people don't have an internal dialogue. Is that what you said?
No, I said that I heard that 40% of people. So I don't know what survey this was, but I heard somebody reference it that said they didn't, like, self-reported that they didn't have like an internal dialogue.
That's
I don't know.
Like,
maybe they don't understand what internal dialogue means, and they do have it, but
That'd explain a lot.
That would also be worrying if they didn't know what internal dialogue meant.
I'm actually looking here as well in MMA decisions, and you know they have the nicknames, and they have Mean, Hakeem Dawodu. They have no nickname for Kevin Swanson. I'm like, oh, excuse me, excuse me, there. But yeah, look. This was, I thought, first round definitely Cub, second round definitely Dawodu, and the third round, like literally the most toss of a coin round you could possibly get. Like, it's funny, this one and the Gallagher one are kind of similar in that, like, you two clear enough rounds, in my opinion, and then one kind of a toss of a coin one.
Well,
so
was it not the Ryan Shelley? Yeah. Remember that fight? That was like, he ended up getting the decision, and there was a lot of controversy because he'd landed from his back, but kind of reminded me of that one. But I think Shelley had actually thrown a few more elbows, a few more he'd been a little bit more less kind of pity patty, less Chael Sonnen-y in his ground and pound shots.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, other than that, on that card, Luke and Adesanya, they put on a very grueling fight. It was, interesting. Luke kind of, once he started winning the wrestling and clinch battle, it was kind of done from there, I think. And he got a very good performance out of him. A guy who had a brain bleed last year and had to be cleared to fight again, fair play. Dos Anjos, I think they mentioned in the commentary as well, like he's kind of stuck between 155 and 170, and this was a fight that really showed, like, against a guy I don't think is as skilled as him, but it's just the power and the size of him. He just couldn't maneuver him around like you would guys at 170. So I think
I've said it for years now. I think they should make 155, 165 and 175 the weight classes. I think there's a lot of guys who would immediately jump to that weight class.
Yeah, probably. They probably would be all right. But yeah, other than that, Kelly Roundtree looked very good. Good kind of comeback win for Lucindo there. Terence McKinney got a lovely knockout. There was a nice Kimura from Martin Budde. And there was two things stood out. Damon Blackshear got a lovely twister. It's only, the third in UFC history. And then Jacqueline Amorim, she looked really, really, really good here, moving on to 7-1. I think she kind of came into the UFC and had a bad performance, but she looked fantastic here. Isaac Dulgarian as well. He's only 6-0. He's like a two-time state champion wrestler or something like that. His wrestling looks absolutely legit. Do you know, one thing I would say as well, I like the fact that they're putting the likes of Amory and the likes of Dulgarian on this, like, good up-and-comers. Like, Bellator have kind of done a lot of that, and I love to see that. But and I said it last week as well, there's so many mismatches now in the UFC. Like, so many mismatches. It's crazy. And I wonder, is it a ploy from them? And actually, if it was a ploy, I would actually criticize it less, because maybe you need that with the whole Dana White Contender Series stuff that's going on at the moment, because you're bringing people in, like look at Dulgarian there. He's 6-0, so he came in with 5 fights under him before he came into the UFC. Like, that's not enough fights to come into the UFC. If they are putting him in there against people who they think they can actually absolutely trash, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing, to build them up and then move them forward slowly. So, it doesn't look good on a UFC card, but UFC cards aren't.
You know what would have made that card way better? The UFC card.
Roberto Soldic? Someone?
Paul Hughes.
Paul Hughes, yeah, he would have. Come on. How's Paul Hughes not signed yet?
Oh, I don't know. Morgan Charrier signed for the UFC Paris card anyway.
Yeah, but that makes sense. Like, come on.
Yeah, but so did, like, UFC London for an Irish fighter is, 20, 30, 40 euro Ryanair flight. Like,
I agree. Like, the thing about this here, though, like, we all agree,
Paul Hughes. The UK scene are excited about. Anybody who watches Cage Warriors is excited about Paul Hughes. Like,
100%.
So it's not just an Irish thing,
Oh, no. But
people who are like Kaposa would tell you, like, if you asked them about Paul Hughes, like, people who are big into MMA are excited about this guy.
Luke Thomas.
He would have made this card way better.
100%. The only thing I'm giving out, like, I've no one's beating the drum harder for Paul Hughes than me. Everyone knows that, but did people get mad about, can't believe Sharia was signed before Hughes? Like, Sharia signed because it's in fucking France, and like, if this was in Dublin, it'd be Paul Hughes getting signed,
But like, we're talking about for years, Ian Garry and Paul Hughes, who's the better prospect? And like, look how well Ian Garry's doing. We're going to talk about him shortly. And, Paul Hughes has just been left behind. And I don't know. for him watching all these random Contender Series guys get signed and all these random guys fight and nobody cares about, and all these cards that we're talking about here every few weeks, it's puzzling. I don't know what's going on there. That like he definitely deserves to be in the UFC, and I think anybody that's followed him would agree.
I think he needs to get a fight though. Like he needs to take a fight. Whether it's
he shouldn't have to. He shouldn't have to. No, but the longer it goes, he
can't leave it. I also think now we need to start recalibrating what we say about the Contender Series, because before it was like, and I think this was kind of the Brendan Loughnane thing. If you don't put on, if you don't get a finish, or if you just go in there and dominate, so you're not going to.
But even if you put on the most boring heavyweight fight of all time, you get signed.
Now everyone's getting signed. So
he was like, he was an underdog, even though the fight was terrible. Get over here, big guy.
So I think it's a better option now, really. And I think if Paul Hughes probably had his time again, or if it was now, I think he probably would take that. So maybe even if he's offered it now, maybe he will take it, and we'll see how it goes on that. You mentioned next week we'll get to the UFC.
No, before you go on, we need to talk about the biggest news of the night in MMA last night.
What?
Sean Sheehan's the tormentor and biggest hater of Daniel Cormier, Sean Sheehan, got a response from his rival finally on social media publicly.
Yeah, one of which was deleted. He did.
What was deleted?
He responded 3 times to the same tweet. I'm like, okay, Daniel, hello. He was like, if you think it's so easy, you could do the job yourself or something like that. It's funny though. The tweet he responded to was probably the nicest tweet I've sent about 5 years. I was literally just making a joke, and I put smiley faces and all in it. It was I wasn't even really criticizing him. It just looked a bit funny, So yeah, he obviously knew what he had done and fucked up, and that's why he got mad about it. But yeah. Fair play.
It was a pretty barnstorming run he made away from the middle of the octagon. He's still nimble.
He's like Mo Salah going off the wing or something, absolutely flying up there. But yeah, fair play to him. Kelly Roundtree, though, just to mention him again, he was very good. And I just think, the whole Cormier walking away thing, it looked very disrespectful when Kelly Roundtree's just standing there and the lad interviewing you had just turned his back on you and gone. So anyway, doesn't matter. Right, let's move on. Next week, PFL. First of all, Hinan Fahea, Maurice Green, Dennis Goltsov, Josh Hederman in the heavyweight bracket, Pacheco Olenek, Martina Makina against Amanda Leibrook. I would say 3 of those are guaranteed wins. Possibly, well, maybe not necessarily Fahea Green, but Pacheco's definitely winning, Goltsov's definitely winning. That Leibrook one and Makatina could be interesting. But yeah, Nate Kelly's on this card as well, Graeme. I called him the most improved Irish fighter over the last few fights, and I stick by that. I'll be doing a preview for this card, so I'll be looking into his opponent, Damon Nelson. But from Nate Kelly, I remember watching some of his fights when he got to the on the Bellator 275 card, and I watched the Shamrock fight, I think live possibly, because there was a bit of talk about that. And I was like, oh, Jesus, Scott Pedersen's a good opponent here. And he went in and he won that. And then he won a fight in Centurion. And I think, okay, maybe the things are changing. And I think his last 3 or 4 performances have really shown that he lost these first 2 fights, and anyone who loses their first 2 fights, but I watched a few of his amateur fights as well doing research, and I'm like, I don't know, there might be issues here. He lost
the first 2 fights, and then he went in there against Mark Andrew, who had kind of had a similar start to his career, but is also a really good fighter. So he didn't shy away. He didn't immediately try to fight a guy who's 1-50 or something. So he's been winning ever since. That's 5 years now, and it's important, that Mark Andrew fight was an important turning point. We talk about it all the time. You need to get that momentum going, and he really has. And he's gradually kind of improved, and his opponents have been more experienced, or a few more fights on their record, and he's kind of gradually building it, and it's the way to do it. And now, when you're kind of more experienced yourself and you're more comfortable in these situations, and you've been in big shows, and it's not a shock to your system, then you can kind of step up and kind of, maybe if you've been flying under the radar like he has, you can grab people's attention. So, I expect him to go out there and put on a great performance here and win. And I'm looking forward to see what they do in him next. But obviously he's got to get this fight done. But yeah, I think, as you said, he's improved so much, and I expect him to look improved again here. And I think he's going to go out and probably finish or win a dominant decision.
Yeah, he's won 7 in a row now, and like the clear, obvious improvements he's made in those fights have been insane. Like from a guy I was watching, I'm thinking like, well, he's Irish. I don't want to say anything too bad about him, but I'm not convinced to know if I'm thinking like, well, this guy is really good. It's mad. Like, and that's why I even call him one of the most improved fighters in Ireland. Very, very good. And look, what he's going to do is he's probably, if he wins here on, what day is it on? Wednesday, Thursday, he'll probably be on the Irish card, I would say, in December for PFL Europe, and then hopefully he'll be in one of the tournaments next year. So that'd be absolutely massive if he could get into that. And like with Bellator though, and PFL as well, like we don't know what's going to happen. Like our PFL buying Bellator, like what's going on? Scott Coker said they're doing a few more cards. So I suppose that's a discussion for another day. But I think a lot of these lads are maybe kind of in an in-between period at the moment, like whether you're in BFL or whether you're in Bellator, like what's going to actually happen next. So I suppose we'll wait and see on that one.
Just another thing on Nathan Kelly before we go. Like if people have a look back at his amateur record, he has win over Jack Maguire, Kieran Clark, Owen Drumgoole, some very good guys. He was at the IMAF World Championships, lost a decision to Youssef. He's beaten Ian Cleary. He fought Richie Spullen in his third ever. Like this guy is experienced more than you'd think. And the guy he lost to in the finals of the IMAFs, I believe it was 10-3 pro MMA record here. So all this will stand him in good stead. And as you said, he's improving fight to fight. He's got experience. He's fought multiple times in a week and things like that. So he's kind of done it all already. And now he's, as you said, he's on a 7-fight win streak. He's really in a good position here as long as he keeps winning, and the sky's the limit, really. Yeah,
100%. Oh, can't wait for that one. KSW 85, then they have 2 title fights on that. Saladin Parnas against Robert Rujala. Parnas, very interesting, going back down to 145. He was due to fight at 155 only, what was it, 6 or 7 weeks ago. Interesting to see how that happens. It should be a fun fight. Rujala is a good fighter. Then, as I said, the 205 title as well. 10-0. Bogdan Gudinko, who is very exciting against a different sort of fighter in Ibrahim Shizagayev, who kind of very much stand in the middle and wait for that big shot or wait for that big takedown. I have a preview for that coming out, so there's some good people on the undercard as well, and I'm sure Sean Neely will have his preview as well this week for that one. But it's the big card coming up next week is UFC. There's also the Contender Series is back. I didn't catch it last week, but George Hardwick is headlining this week, which is massive for him. I know some people were giving out about this, and I agree he should have been straight into the UFC, but the lightweight division is just so packed, and they do want people going in through the Contender Series. But if people don't know him, definitely tune in for George Hardwick. Imre Somnes is on this as well, who I've watched fighting a good few times in different places. He's fought on Cage Wars, and where else has he fought? In like Bamar somewhere back in the day. But yeah, he's a good fighter. He's a good fighter as well, and definitely one to keep an eye on in that one as well. So the Contender Series is back there. UFC 292 then, Graeme. Ian Garry, he's fighting Neil Magny. He was obviously supposed to fight Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal pulled out. There was a bit of controversy about that, even about the video and stuff that got released. And it was more Ian's manager than Ian himself. And I would tend to agree with those people who were giving out about Ian's manager. I'm like, ugh, you're supposed to be looking out for the fighters here, and you're calling them pussies or whatever. It was like, okay, another one of these people. Are you okay, grand? And it's Gary V's company as well, which Gary V's an absolute fucking bullshit artist. So there you go now. But hopefully Ian Garry can stay out of that bullshit and fight well here against Neil Magny. It's a very interesting fight. It's a very different test, I think, to Jeff Neal. Like Jeff Neal, more of like stand in the middle, throw his big shots. You can kind of, if you're in Garry, you can kind of maneuver around him and jab him up and land your shots and avoid the power, and that's kind of it. It's a very simplistic matchup, I would think. Not a simple match, but a simplistic matchup, I think. Whereas Neil Magny, a lot different. Like, Neil can kind of use his length, he can kick from the outside, he's good takedowns, good against defense. But as we've seen as well in the past, if you can get up on Neil Magny, stop his takedowns, you're really on to a winner. So that's what Ian Garry needs to do. First things first is dominate from length, stop him getting inside, stop the takedowns, and once you do that, I think Ian Garry has a little bit more power, a little bit more technical nous. I think the tactical nous is a very interesting one here. I think he'll have to show a very good tactical nous here. We've seen it before from Ian Garry. He's a really good tactical fighter. Even in a few interviews, when he used to do interviews with me back in the day, now that he stopped, but it's great. But he used to even give away things about like the tactics he would use in fights. Your man, that big hairy lad that he fought, he said he was going to like jab the nose off him, and he did. Like, and he did it, so he had no problem doing that. But I do think he'll have to fight a good tactical fight here. But I do think
is Rachmanov the big hairy lad? Is he?
Yeah. What was his first name? Is it? Let me.
Shavkat.
No, not Shavkat. He didn't fight Shavkat Rachmanov. What are you talking about? Rasta Makman.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was looking at Magny's record earlier, and I got the two mixed up.
Come here to me. What do you think of this fight?
I think, like, you know, obviously the late change in opponents and styles, as you kind of talked about there, isn't ideal. I'd prefer if Ian Garry had a full camp for Neil Magny, and Neil Magny kind of strikes me as a guy who stays fit even when he doesn't have a fight lined up. But he's also coming in on short notice, and he hasn't had time to study Garry as closely as he would have liked to. So there is that kind of extra kind of factor in there. But I think Ian's he's going to be a contender very soon. And I think I expect him to go out there and beat Neil Magny. I think, Neil Magny's obviously been in there with everybody. He's a tough guy. He's kind of fought everybody, who's who, and he's beaten Daniel Rodriguez, who to date is Ian Garry's best win in the UFC. So he's definitely no easy fight for anybody. But I think Ian Garry's just too slick, too quick, too technical. He understands striking a lot better than Neil Magny does, and distance and timing and things like that. And he's well able to grapple. Obviously, he doesn't want to end up on his back, and Neil Magny can hold you there and make it uncomfortable and land small shots and maybe eke out rounds. But as long as he avoids that and plays it smart and has been training like he should be and all that stuff, and there's nothing going on that we don't know about, injuries and things like that, as long as everything's good to go, then I think he should put on a pretty dominant decision win here, or maybe get a TKO finish. Indeed, yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. It's a massive test for Ian Garry, but he's well able for it, and I think he'll get through it. So it's not a bad card other than that. Look, the prelims, not amazing. I wouldn't say, but Chris Weidman coming back, really looking forward to seeing how he fares against Brad Tavares. Chito Vera against Pedro Munoz is an interesting fight as well, obviously towards the top 5 or top 10 of that division. And then we've the 2 title fights, Zhang Weili against Amanda Lemos and Aljamain Sterling against Sugar Sean O'Malley. I'm actually I think I'm more excited about this Sterling O'Malley fight than any UFC or title fight in a long time, maybe apart from Jones against Gagne. This, to me, is such a fucking intriguing fight. And not even it's just, do you know what it is? There's been a lot of intriguing tactical fights and technical fights over the last while, but I just think all around, Sean O'Malley, and I'm on the record as maybe not being the biggest fan of Sean O'Malley's shtick, but Sean O'Malley's sending him pictures of his dinner, and saying, I had a great training session this morning. How about you, Aljo? And that's the sort of old school Rampage Jackson, John Jones going back and forth type of thing that I absolutely love. I think that's good. I think it's a very interesting technical matchup. You have the lad in Aljamain Sterling who is probably not getting the flowers that he deserves, and I think with reason, to be fair. And the reason isn't him. The reason is TJ Dillashaw, the fuck shoulder, Henry Cejudo kind of looks shot, the illegal knee. He had a great win over Yan, and I think he is a great fighter, but he needs to beat people like O'Malley, I think, to prove that. But even if he does beat O'Malley here, people will probably say, O'Malley, he was all hype all along, we knew it. You know what I mean? That's just how it goes in MMA. Yeah, that's true. But then the other side of it, then, you're O'Malley, and you're this is the massive opportunity. If he wins, you could have a star on your hands. You could absolutely have a star on your hands. And can he stop the takedown? Can he stop Aljo getting on his back? Can he land the big head kick, the big shot? I don't think O'Malley's necessarily as big a hitter as maybe he or other people make out. And we all know when it gets to this sort of level, that changes very quickly as well. Is he more kind of stylish and different than his strikes, or are they actually as impactful? That hasn't really been proven, as you're saying, yeah.
Well, and like, can he do it against Sterling, who's very good, like, at lint, and even though maybe he's not the best striker in the world, he's a good striker, but he's more a very awkward guy to fight against, I think, when you're fighting at lint. I mean, like, your whole game plan is going to be to beat him at lint. A very tough thing to do for Sterling.
And if he's put on his back for a long period, how's his defensive jiu-jitsu going to look as well? Like, true. We saw what Justin Gaethje's looked like in the Khabib fight. So, you never know until you see it, really, don't you?
Our guy Andrew McGahan says he's good jiu-jitsu, so, we'll see. And then Zhang Weili against Amanda Lemos. Lemos is one thing I thought last night watching the Cub fight and a few other fights as well. She's a competitor, I would say, and to be a competitor keeps you in fights and wins you fights. But against Zhang Weili, I think that's going to be tough. If you look at her record, like, who's the best win on her record? You'd probably say Marina Rodriguez, who is a good fighter, make no mistake about that. But is that going to be enough to beat Zhang Weili?
What does she offer that the other people that Wang Li has beaten didn't offer, what I mean?
I think it's going to be a tough
anything can happen in MMA, but this is a very tough matchup, I think.
I think if she can come in there and just make it tough on Zhang Weili, land a few power shots inside, don't the worst thing you can do against Zhang Weili, in my opinion, is allow her to get into her rhythm.
Yeah, take her out of her game plan as soon as you can.
Yeah, even if it's, she's not exactly the biggest submission artist to take her down, but push her against the cage. Even if you're not going to take her down, but if you can take her down, take her down. But then, even on the feet, just throw that like you can get away and have nothing happen for half a round and land your big shot and frustrate her, take her out of her game plan. Don't let that kind of cadence go. The example I always give is Whitaker against Yoel Romero. He just stopped he stopped Romero's ability to kind of time his big flying knees or his big shots by just being in his face all the time. Now, I don't think necessarily that's the best way to do it for Lemos here. Maybe the opposite is actually the way to do it. Never be in her face, type of thing. So it's an interesting one. I would favour Zhang Weili massively. But the thing about Zhang Weili is as well, right? You look at her and there's this massive fight against possibly Yan Xiaonan in China down the road, right? But then there's Tatiana Suarez as well, who everyone is talking about as the next champion. Could she look ahead a little bit and thinking, right, okay, my two biggest challengers are on the way here. I just kind of have to get past Amanda Lemos. And if you start doing that, that's a very, very bad thing to start doing. So interesting, I think, Graeme. Interesting. So we'll see how all of that unfolds and how all of that goes.
Chris Weidman, how do you see this? Obviously as a broken leg, we haven't seen many broken legs. We saw Anderson, Corey Hill, Weidman, and Connor. Are they all the broken legs?
There was a couple there all at one stage, remember? And but as badly broken as this, I think the
clean breaks. I think. It'd be interesting to see how he looks. The bookies don't have much faith in him. If he was fighting Brad Tavares and he hadn't broken his leg, even if he was on a 2-year layoff, it's plus 210 for Weidman.
Interesting. Do you know what I think? He came back and he did a jiu-jitsu match and it was kind of under lights and all. I think that'll help, I wonder with Weidman as well, right? Before he went, maybe people don't remember, but he didn't look amazing. He looked like an older fighter. I just wonder if the time out has maybe helped a little bit. Maybe while the leg was healing, maybe did the knee heal or maybe did the shoulder heal or, I don't know. Now, maybe that's me being very, very positive on it and hopeful on it.
There's a lot of questions that could possibly be playing a factor here. And, maybe the leg's never going to be the same, or maybe it's as good as new and he's healed up other injuries, as you said, and he's had time to kind of, think about his game and get in a better mental space, or adapt his game maybe to the away from the traits he used to use successfully that he can't use anymore due to kind of slowing down a little bit and things like that. So there's a lot of questions. I'm very interested to see how he looks and how this fight looks and this fight looks, and I'm actually very tempted to bet on Weidman. It's easy to forget how good a fighter this guy was, how dominant he was, against really good wrestlers like Mark Munoz. Mark Munoz didn't land one strike in that whole fight. He just got
elbowed the head off. Remember that? Yeah, he burst that he's
he went in there
facing.
and beat Damian Maia, cutting shitload of weight on really short notice to get into the
35
UFC
pounds
when nobody
in
wanted to
games.
fight Damian Maia. Like, this guy is a serious wrestler, a serious grappler, and he knocked out Anderson Silva. So like, he's done it all in the past, and it'd be great to see him, put it together again. But obviously, the bookies aren't confident, and I can see why with all the questions around it. We've never seen anybody come back from a broken leg as serious as that in the UFC that I can recall. So it'll if he can come back and look good, it'll bode well for somebody like Conor coming back as well.
Anderson getting back.
Not the same though.
Yeah, but Anderson was a lot older.
I suppose he was really old. Yeah, it's hard to. Anderson is kind of like, did he get old, or was it never the same after the leg, or is it a mental thing about the leg? You can't throw the leg kicks the same way Anderson used to throw vicious leg. Maybe it's a mental thing. Maybe it's an age thing. Maybe it's a.
But like you see in other sports, even
thing.
like look at say like Luke Shaw is a great example. He broke his leg in half, and
you're not getting leg kicks, and you're not leg kicking.
It took him 18 months to kind of come back to start playing well. Like, he looked like he's never going to be the same. Like Seamus Coleman, another guy, took him a while to kind of come back as well. And
maybe the trust the leg is like the biggest thing. Maybe it's just a mental block where you like. I've had knee injuries. I have a knee injury at the moment, and I partially fractured my tibia as well. So like, I can definitely see how you would fear even like playing football or running too hard or anything in the early stages of coming back, no matter how many times the doctor tells you that it's good as new.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just delighted. I think you agree with me. Just delighted to see him back, and delighted to see him fit and able again. Hopefully he goes in there and he puts on a good performance and all of that. But I probably
and surely Sarah and Longo will be in his corner, which is always a great entertainment.
Keep breathing, Grace, keep breathing. Yeah, indeed. All right, that was a long and fruitful podcast there, Graeme. I feel like we've probably forgotten something, but sure, look, we'll go at it again if we have, and we let you all go there. If you haven't signed up to our Patreon, please do patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. I know a lot of people saw our clip from last week and were very we're very receptive to it, and we appreciate that. So if you want to kind of help us out and keep us covered in sport the right way, as I feel we've done again today, the best place to do that is patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. It's only $5, plus VAT, so it's not too much. We're not robbing you like off the ball. Yeah,
and if you actually don't want to pay a cent, like going over and following us on social media, and especially following our YouTube page, all the links are like on our social medias and on our SevereMMA.com/links. Like, obviously people are struggling, and but just a few clicks and a subscribe would be much appreciated.
I'm monetized on Twitter now as well, so if you want to just reply to my tweets there, that'd be fantastic.
Watch Sean Sheehan's Twitter videos on loops while you're sleeping.
I told people to stop following me on Twitter, and I was just, please start following me again on Twitter. That'd be absolutely brilliant. But
a little bit of money has changed your point of view completely.
Oh no, fuck that. Oh, hold on, wait. Elon Musk legend. I wonder how long this will last. Like, it can't last, surely, because they're saying it's so it costs what, like £8 a month or something, and the minimum is like a tenner. If you're over 5 million thingies in the last 3 months, like that's not going to pay them. Like, they're going to be paying more out than they're actually getting in with the Twitter Blue thing and all. But maybe with advertising and all, I don't know. But who knows?
It's probably to attract people over to start putting their videos. People who would traditionally put them on maybe YouTube, or YouTube probably pays a lot more, but maybe Rumble or things like that, or I don't know, the Kick, things like that. So it's obviously trying to get people over, trying to entice them. But I'd be wary about how long it would last as well. Yeah,
we'll see. Well, sure, I'll get the money while the gun's good, and we'll leave it at that. All right, everyone, follow me at Chauncey NBA, at SevereMMA, at SevereMMA Pod on Twitter, on Instagram as well. We're nearly at 3,000 followers on Instagram, so it's SevereMMA.com. We are over on Instagram. Follow us there, and YouTube as well. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud, if you're listening to this on iTunes, if you're listening to this on Spotify or wherever it might be, please subscribe. Click the subscribe button. I think there's something, Graeme, like, I think it's only like 10% of people who listen are actually subscribed. So please do that if you're there. So that'd be absolutely fantastic. And we leave it there. Graeme, have you a quote for us for the week to let us out on?
What she said was sad, but then all the rejection she's had, to pretend to be happy could only be idiocy.
We'll see you next week. Good luck.